So I hear you want to know about systems thinking and why you think that that's important. Well, great. Let me explain it to you. A system is a group of interacting, interrelated, or interdependent components that form a complex and unified whole. Virginia and Anderson and Lauren Johnson said that. So a system can be mechanical, like a yo-yo, right? That goes down, comes back up. A bunch of gears and things working together to operate in a certain way with a function. A system could be natural, like bumblebees and flowers. The bumblebees pollinate the flowers, they pollinate, they grow seeds, and it continues over and over again. Systems can be social, like families or teams of coworkers that function together and work together to achieve a certain result. Each change in that system can bring about other changes. So systems are components that work together as a whole, often to accomplish things. So a pile of screws and gears aren't a system if they're just sitting in a bowl together, but if you put them together into a watch, that's a system. So what is systems thinking? Oftentimes we think of problems and we see just an immediate cause and effect. So say you're working a construction job, you're a foreman, and you keep on having scaffolding accidents every week. Our first thought is to look directly at the person that's setting up the scaffolding and blaming that person. This is the way we typically think, and it's called linear thinking. We see a cause and an effect and get rid of the cause if it's bad. Really, though, the problem may be a symptom of a greater problem, and someone may be fired, but the scaffolding will just give out again soon, and the failure of the scaffolding is just feedback of a greater problem in the system. So systems thinking is different. Instead of just blaming the person, we look at the system that's in place for setting up scaffolding. Maybe there's some nuts and screws that are weak or faulty. Maybe there's a rush to get the job done. So the crew is missing some important part of things, or they're just rushing and skipping something. So it could be a number of things. The idea is to look at the larger whole, see the events, the patterns, the structure, and even the ideas of people that are part of the system, evaluate it, and see what can be changed. Now, a church is a lot more complicated than scaffolding because rather than certain set of materials, we have different personality types, different cultural influences, different ideas for how a church should be run. So we often think that each department within a church is responsible for their own things, but each department has to come together to produce a certain result as a whole for the whole church. So the result is called feedback. Sometimes that feedback is good, like creating new disciples and having new disciples in the church. Sometimes the result or the feedback of the system is bad, which is burnt out leadership. So, for example, if you fire a worship leader because it seems like he's doing a poor job and hire a new worship leader, but you notice the worship times are still lacking, you may be tempted to fire that new one. That's linear thinking. Systems thinking looks at the greater whole. Maybe rather than the worship leader just being bad, maybe the congregation is divided in terms of what kind of music they like, so they constantly pressure the worship leader, which leads him to try to appease the whole crowd and failing. Or maybe the musicians are playing music that's different than what they know how to, or maybe the music's more complicated than what they're used to. Maybe the church wants to save money, so they keep on hiring people at entry level pay rather than finding somebody that's a little more experienced. So this type of thinking is called systems thinking. Now, you see why systems thinking is important, especially as a leader of your church, which with normal linear thinking, you may temporarily solve a problem, but it's like whack-a-mole where it'll pop up again somewhere else. With systems thinking, you may have a longer and more complicated process ahead of you, but chances are your congregation or the people you lead will be far better off. So I hope that answers the question.